So gay rights laws are passed on a state-by-state basis. An attempt has been made to pass it on a federal basis, but that has not been successful, and I don't think it's going to be successful with the current Congress. And then Harvey Milk in San Francisco, I think, is a name that many of you know, and he became a supervisor in the city of San Francisco in the late 70s, and then eventually was murdered by Dan White. And I think many people see Harvey Milk as a kind of a symbolic leader of the gay rights movement. But that was already toward the latter part of the 70s. In 1979, we had our first national march. I think there have been 3 or 4 big national gay rights marches. The one in 1979 had tens of thousands of people, but almost no media attention. It took a long time to get the media, including the New York Times, to pay any attention to us. And I also wanted to mention the importance of gay literature. There was a group of gay writers called the Violet Quill, and many gay writers, both men and women, were writing very interesting poetry and novels, and that, I think, contributed to an enriched gay and lesbian culture, which continues to this day. And gay bookstores began to open up. One of them was the Oscar Wilde Memorial Bookstore in New York, which was actually opened even before Stonewall. And I think those people like myself who are active in the Gay Liberation Front, I think we're not generally known. I did, with another writer, a lesbian named Carla J., I wrote or edited 4 books on gay topics in the early 70s that were pretty well distributed, and there's been many more books since then. But this was really the pioneer group that made the gay movement happen, and then over time we see what we have today with these large organizations and many victories, and many more that still need to come. And there have been victories in some countries around the world. In some ways, Europeans have gone ahead of the United States in this area. And on the other hand, in some countries, homosexual acts are still illegal. There's still people in jail. So I think I'm going to take just a couple of more minutes to read something that I wrote, and then we'll open this up to comments and questions. Oh, I did want to say a group of us from the Gay Liberation Front are getting together next month. We're having a little reunion. There'll probably be about 40 people there, and we're going to march together. One of the things that we feel is very important is the gay pride marches that started. The first one was in June of 1970, 1 year after Stonewall. It wasn't called the Gay Pride March. It was called Christopher Street Liberation Day in honor of the Stonewall event. And we had no idea what was going to happen or how many people would come. And there were probably about 5,000 people that participated that first time. It was really pretty amazing. And I always try to remind people, why is it called pride? Because what's the opposite of pride? It's shame. And we were getting rid of what you might call the shackles of shame. So about 4 years ago, we had another reunion of our Gay Liberation Front, and we were invited to, some of us were invited to be on a panel discussion at the New York Public Library. And I was one of 8 people, and I wrote something. They said the allotted time was 7 minutes, so I think this is going to take about 7 minutes. And I was given a specific topic. I was supposed to talk about the structure and influence of GLF. I actually started out my talk remembering some of the people who died, because many of the people who were active in the movement died of AIDS as well as other things, as you might imagine. But I'm not talking much today about the AIDS crisis that came after the 70s, and of course that's played a major role in the evolution of gay life and the gay movement. So this tells a little bit about me. I guess I don't think I use this microphone very well. I grew up on a chicken farm in the Catskills, the son of Jewish labor activists who joined the Communist Party, and I had 6 years of university education. At the time of the Stonewall Rebellion, I was an anti-war activist and journalist associated with Liberation News Service, living communally uptown. What my so-called comrades didn't know about me was that whenever I could get away, I went down to Greenwich Village to cruise in bars, including the Stonewall Inn. I didn't have gay friends, and I never had a single conversation about what it meant to be a gay man. So at this point, I'm in my late 20s. At least I was partly out of the closet and even had experienced a significant and exciting, though highly secretive, relationship with my Columbia roommate. I want to add one quick comment here. If you haven't seen the movie Brokeback Mountain, I recommend that you see that if you're interested in this topic. That movie was set in 1962, which was right around the time that I had this secret affair with my college roommate. And when I watched that movie, I was amazed, even though that was set in the cowboy scene in Wyoming. It was the same on an emotional level. It was very similar to what I experienced in the 1962. I enjoyed sex, and it irritated the hell out of me that people at LNS probably viewed me as asexual, married to the movement, I suppose the way nuns are married to Jesus. Most important, however, was the shame and doubt I had about being homosexual. In all of my teen years and into my mid-20s, I was consumed with dreadful self-loathing, sometimes leading to suicidal thoughts, no matter how successful I was on the surface. Minutes after I walked into the basement of that Episcopal church at 9th Avenue and 28th Street, where we had our meetings, I knew that it was the time and the place for me to join with others to work for my own liberation. GLF member Nestor Latronica recently described how he felt about his involvement in GLF. Quote, he said, "The world felt new as if it had just been created," unquote. I had similar feelings. Though I had been going to gay bars since the mid-60s, I had never been in a room full of homosexuals where there was both laughter and serious conversation, and the primary purpose was fighting for our rights. Former GLFers use words such as anarchic and chaotic and exhilarating to describe GLF meetings, and I agree. By the time I joined GLF, I joined in January of 1970, the organization had existed for several months, so its structure was established, and I can only talk from experience. There was, in fact, very little structure. No constitution, no bylaws, mission statement, meeting agenda, or membership application was ever shown to me. If you walked through the doors, you were a GLF member. There were cells for those with a special interest, and anyone could join a cell or form a new one. There was a chairperson elected for 1 month who presided over the weekly meetings. And I met Carla J. when she was the chairman, and she had a baseball bat to try and encourage order, because we didn't follow Robert's rules of order. Of course, she didn't really do anything more than bang the bat on the floor. It was kind of a joke. There was no budget, no paid staff, no press spokesman, no real estate. The organization functioned by consensus, which meant no voting, but there were exceptions. I remember 2 votes, one to make a cash donation to the Black Panther Party, another to provide seed funds for a women-only dance. I voted yes on both matters. People like me who were familiar with the social movements of the 60s were an outspoken segment of the GLF membership. But many GLFers had no previous involvement in politics. They just knew it was time for change, and these people in the gay life without angst amazed me. Everything became ideological, which was both wonderful and awful. For example, GLF dances provided an alternative atmosphere for socializing, including brighter lighting. The theory was that the dark bars promoted shame, and pride was our mantra. I do remember loud arguments, and there were plenty of those, with some urging that the dance floor be less brightly lit. I think that might have had something to do with the fact that dim lights made it easier to fantasize about how fabulous someone looks. One influence on GLF was the early homophile movement, which courageous men and women had formed on both the East and the West Coasts. Mattachine, Daughters of Bilitis, One, Inc., Homosexual Information Center, Society for Individual Rights, and the newer Committee for Homosexual Freedom in San Francisco. It was the culturally conservative nature of most of this older movement, plus the Stonewall Rebellion, that prompted the formation of a new organization using the word gay for the first time, a word from our subculture, not a word from scientists, and not a name designed to hide. GLFers made our demands known vociferously, without a dress code, and without concern about whether people might think we used marijuana or LSD, which we did quite a bit. GLF was more than the weekly meetings. They were consciousness-raising groups, collectives, new groups of friends, new periodicals. Gay people from all over came to New York to check out what we were doing. People just started GLFs in other locales, and I suspect they also had no bylaws or membership forms. To call them chapters would be misleading. Not everyone fully understood or favored the leftist rhetoric that filled the room every Sunday. I knew that I needed to be more open to learning from the many GLF members who did not share my background. There was much to learn, and every member was a teacher. Unfortunately, some GLFers, in my opinion, thought that they and they alone were the teachers. My GLF experience had a huge influence on my overall political development. I visited Cuba twice as a supporter of the regime, so popular on the left, but I became aware of Castro's horrific homophobic policies, and with my newfound gay consciousness, this was a terrific and somewhat terrifying eye-opener. One reason that new organizations were formed in the 1970s, including the Gay Activist Alliance and the National Gay Task Force, was that we GLFers basked in marginalization. Our limited idea of combating racism was to endorse the Black Panther Party. I and others chanted, "Go left, go gay, go pick up the gun," which was a modification of a Panther chant. How embarrassing and ridiculous is that? Did we think we would gain support and change society by chanting that and other chants like, "Ho, ho, homosexual, the ruling class is ineffectual"? Nuance, not observed at GLF meetings, has now become one of my favorite words. For example, the nuclear family reviled by GLF can indeed be horribly repressive, and I have friends who suffer endlessly because of their homophobic parents. But nuclear families also offer many gay people love, support, and a valued heritage. Some worthy GLF ideas just couldn't overcome deep cultural influence. For example, we wanted to put an end to the hostile, negative use of such sexualized epithets as "you suck," "get fucked," and "you're an asshole." But that seems like a lost cause now. We were certainly right to celebrate our sexuality, to cite sexist patriarchy as the root cause of our oppression, to seek repeal of anti-gay laws, challenge the psychiatric establishment, which declared us to be sick, and reject religion's depiction of us as immoral monsters. We did something else which has been mostly lost in the contemporary gay rights movement. We examined our own behavior and worked on making changes and striving toward a true loving community. We've had many victories, however, and gay liberation lives on with the infusion of openly gay people in all aspects of society where peace and social justice are being sought today. In the 40 years since Stonewall, therefore, the biggest victory is helping bring an end to fear and secrecy for millions. And that reality reflects our best and most memorable chant, "Out of the closets and into the streets." And we'll be in the streets on June 30th, and maybe some of you will see us there. Thank you. So I'm happy to answer your questions or have a discussion.
Hi, my name is Jana, and I'm part of the ISP. Hi, my name is Jana, and I'm part of the ISP class.
What is ISP, please?
The interdisciplinary class.
Thank you.
Yes. I saw a documentary called Southern Comfort a few years ago about gender identity and someone who was born a woman going through the transition of being a man. And it was a beautiful, beautiful movie, documentary that showed me problems in the gay community that I would have never known existed. Sort of like the previous to Chaz Bono and what Chaz Bono went through. But a friend of mine and I were having a discussion about it, and we were wondering, how do you feel about this new buzzword where people are talking about the heteronormative and accepting someone who's gay like Jason Collins or McGreevy or a Sarah Gilbert, someone who doesn't seem gay and is not the visual cue or the auditory cue, and how is that pushing you back in the movement of being accepted in all the flavors in the full spectrum?
Well, I think this has been an issue in the gay community for some time. I mean, I remember when there were personal ads and people, guys anyway, would put no fats, no femmes, no freaks. Or they would say straight acting male seeks other. So this is not anything new. I think that we talked about this a lot in the Gay Liberation Front. And there were even some bad feelings about it. I remember there was a group that called themselves, a group of guys who called themselves Femmes Against Sexism. And they would criticize more masculine acting men. I was criticized. I like to wear kind of work boots, and I was criticized for the shoes I was wearing by these men who thought that I was trying to show that I was masculine. So there are a lot of discussions and issues about role playing. And I think that has gone on and will continue to go on. Heteronormative is something that's come out of the academic world, like a lot of multisyllabic words. And I, as a journalist, Michael and I were discussing about what the difference between journalists. I think at one point I said, well, journalists aren't intellectual. I don't know if that's true, but there is a difference between journalists and academics in their approach to information and knowledge. We could spend an hour talking about that. But anyway, I think that there needs to be, people need to be themselves. I think that people who, the old term in the old gay language is Nelly Queens. Nelly Queens deserve respect. A basketball player who's, an accomplished athlete, I mean, what do I want him to do? Wear a dress and have a limp wrist? That's not who he is. So I think individuality needs to be respected, and I think some of these discussions are based on the intrusion of dogma in an unhealthy way. I think it's good to discuss ideas, but not to discuss them on a level where there's dogma is created and that you have to follow dogma.
I have two questions, actually. So my first question is, I currently intern at Safe Horizon and in the anti-trafficking program, and I think that's something actually I didn't expect to see, and I got really enlightened by, is the LGBT community and trafficking issues here in the U.S. and the high rate of trafficking in the LGBT.
You're talking about human trafficking?
Yes, human trafficking. And at-risk LGBT youth that are found on the streets every single day, and how it's increased over the years rather than decreased. And I'd assume that, since the 1970s, that this issue would kind of come out to light and people would talk about it and maybe some change would happen. But I kind of became a pessimist after interning there, and it kind of slightly depressed me to see the increase in homelessness, for example, in the LGBT youth, and human trafficking, which is something we don't talk about, and how the LGBT community is more vulnerable to it. And my first question is, how do you think we've changed from the 1970s up to contemporary day society, and whether we have or we haven't? And my second question is in reference to what you said about how you regret being a part of the Black Panthers movement, or possibly working with them, or seeing it as a mistake. Why do you say that it was a mistake? If you could clarify that.
Okay, maybe I'll answer the second question first. I see it as a mistake because I think it was a very narrow perspective. I mean, the number of African Americans who were affiliated with the Black Panthers and supported them was relatively small. They were radicals. They were socialists and radicals. But there were a lot of African Americans, and still are, who are liberal, who want social change, they want civil rights, they want progress, they want good education, and they don't necessarily advocate revolution or the carrying of guns. And I think by focusing on the Panthers, we were taking a stand to try to prove ourselves that we're with you in the revolution. And I think we failed to make the more personal social contact with African American gay men and lesbians that we might have met and had come to our meetings and get involved in our movement. There were a small number who came to our meetings, but a really small number, like a handful. And I think that was a mistake. I think there should have been more outreach of that type rather than just taking a political stance. I think the Panthers did a lot of good things. I'm not attacking the Panthers. I'm just saying that they were a limited segment of the African American community, and we were somewhat narrow to just focus on them, and then to imitate one of their chants, which talked about picking up guns. I don't think that was beneficial. I think some of the people probably thought it was funny, but I don't think you win people over with that. On the issue of trafficking and gay youth, I think that's a big problem. You have gay youth in the street now trafficking is one thing, because that's like very organized, and I don't know too much about it. I know that it exists, and I usually associate it with women. Like I know that certainly in both Europe and the United States, I think Eastern European women have been largely involved, and maybe some Latin American women have been very much victimized by human trafficking. But the issue also is kids who are being thrown out of their homes, and they go to San Francisco or New York because they think maybe they'll have a better chance there. They end up on the street. There are men who are looking for to pay for sex. Women paying for sex is pretty rare. I don't really know too much about it, but I think it's primarily boys, as far as gay people are concerned. Boys that are being picked up by older gay men who are unable or unwilling to obtain sexual partners in a better way than paying for it, and they don't care about what age these boys are, and they're not necessarily cruel to these boys, but they are helping to keep them in a life that is not going to lead to anything good. There's a lot of drugs involved, and I think that there have been people in the gay movement who have focused on this. It's interesting that you mention it, because when I hear criticisms of the large gay organizations that have put so much energy into gay marriage and gays in the military, and one of my criticisms has been gay youth. We have to focus more on gay youth, whether it's just the average high school kid or the gay kids that are in the street, like the ones that you're talking about. I think it's a very important agenda item for the GLBT movement. And I think there are people who are focusing on it, but I think it's not enough. I'm glad you mentioned it. It's very important.
Good evening. I am Erlene King from Interdisciplinary Studies program, and I am an AIDS activist for 13 years. So I deal with lots of gay people. And I didn't hear you mention the Gay Rights Something Association, which is a very large association. I forgot the name because I have staff who deal with that. You know, the association, the Gay Rights Something.
Gay rights?
Yes, something association. No, the Gay Rights Something Association.
You mean the Gay Men's Health Crisis?
The Gay Men's, yes.
Gay Men's Health Crisis.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, well, I did very briefly made a reference to AIDS, but since the AIDS epidemic really began in the 80s, I didn't really consider it to be part of my topic. But the game...
Well, the association started in the 80s.
It's very important, of course, the way that gay men and lesbians responded to the AIDS crisis, and the way that the Reagan administration did not. And then the National Institutes of Health, in fact, I remember when the epidemic was first beginning, people said that NIH stood for not interested in homosexuals, and that's the National Institute of Health, because the government was not doing what it should have been doing in the beginning of the AIDS crisis, and we had to do it ourselves. And the Gay Men's Health Crisis changed its name to GMHC because of the increase in the percentage of people coming down with HIV/AIDS that were not gay. They were heterosexual, especially heterosexual Black and Latin women.
Yeah, because it was the late 70s, the end of the 70s when the crisis started, when AIDS started.
Yes.
And another question I have, the book on psychiatric illnesses, you know, they haven't printed a new version in five years because they want to list gay as a mental illness. And how is that fight continuing? Because
You're talking about the diagnostic manual that's
yes,
put
so
out
they
by
haven't reprint. They can't print it because of this fight not to list it.
Oh, they
as
haven't put out a new manual?
No, they haven't.
Yeah, well, I know that they're debating
Yeah, I wanna
various
know.
issues, but not. I don't think they're debating homosexuality as such. I think they're debating transgender identity.
No,
as
they
to
want
what-
to list it as a mental illness. They want to list gay a part of it. They want to name it in a way in that book as a mental illness.
Oh, I don't
in
think
that
that
book.
that's going to
You
happen.
just mentioned. Oh, because you lost the fight because it was a big fight.
Yeah, I don't think that they're going to specifically list homosexuality as an illness.
About an hour ago, or an hour and a half ago, the class heard Village People's version of YMCA. And we asked them to look at the lyrics and check it out. And could you tell us a little bit about some of the sort of hidden in-jokes involved in that song and maybe some of the other songs that Village People sang? Because, you know, if you heard it on the radio, it's just a rollicking song. You maybe watch the video, you get a kind of suspicion of what's going on. But what did the gay community see as those songs
Well,
became popular?
we identified that song, and then In the Navy was another one of their big hits. Oh, we thought those were totally gay songs because the YMCA was one of the places where you could go cruising and meet men. And so, and people, the YMCA, rented rooms pretty cheap, and there were showers, and you would meet men in the YMCA. It was known for that, and there was even a historic moment. A pretty high-ranking official in the Johnson administration named Walter Jenkins was arrested in the YMCA in Washington, D.C. in some kind of compromising situation with another man. And I mean, that was very well known. And when I mentioned one of our demonstrations, we were marching in the street and we chanted out of the closets and into the streets. And when we passed the 34th Street Y, we chanted out of the showers and into the streets. So we were very aware of the YMCA as being a cruising area. And the producer that put together the Village People, he was putting together these sort of macho stereotypes, the construction worker, the leather guy, the Indian. I don't know what was so macho about that, but anyway. So definitely in the Navy. The Navy was, of all the areas of military service, the Navy was the one that was known to be most, I don't know if I should say gay friendly, but the most propensity for gay soldiers to be and to get to meet each other and maybe get away with having a sexual relationship and not getting caught because maybe some of the officers were gay. So I meant to mention that before and I just forgot, but go ahead.
Thank you for the survey of the 70s. It was really quite nice to see it all put together.
Oh, thank you.
I have two questions. One, I'm asking in part for you to speculate, precisely because you have a background in the left in general and in Marxism. And one of the things that just occurred to me is that there's a lot of writing about the economic underpinnings of what pushed the women's movement, economic underpinnings, what pushed the anti-racist movement, civil rights movement. I don't really know very much about that in terms of the gay movement. Is there anything you can say about what the economic changes are that may have given some, I mean, obviously it was organizing against repression, and it was feeding off other forms of organizing against repression, but is there anything to say about the economic changes that may have moved in the direction of aiding the gay movement?
Well, I can try and tackle that question. I know one thing that that leftists said to us in the beginnings of the gay movement was, "Well, what's your economic basis for your movement? You know, where's the material basis for your repression? You know, gay people can participate in capitalism and they'll be just fine." So I don't think we had an answer to that, and it didn't seem really relevant. I think it was just I think that was just a way for them to conceal their prejudice. I didn't buy it, in other words. I think what I notice now is that, of course, many gay people succeed in capitalism. Many do not. I think that in some areas there's a sort of the idea that, oh, all gay people are rich or gay men are rich. And certainly there's plenty of poor gay men and poor gay women, and I think it's just a stereotype. So I don't think I really have an answer for your question about it, economic underpinning of the movement as such. I think it's more an issue of a human rights movement, of the seeking of equality.
Well, that brings me to my second question, which is the movement started, at least post-Stonewall, as a radical gay liberation movement. Rights were in there, but understood within a radical framework. And as I've watched the gay movement go to 2013, it looks to me like it's become much more of a liberal rights movement than
No
a
question.
radical liberation movement.
That's true.
And there was an element in there which was very interesting, which is certain writers in the queer movement who were talking about this is sort of the fulcrum of what can break the entire gender stereotypes and roles. And that became a very important part of understanding the idea of liberation. And do you see that as still being there, or has it now become the kind of thing where Republicans can feel very comfortable too?
Well, I do think that there still are issues in which people don't feel comfortable with people who don't meet gender norms. I mean, I think you have the elected officials who, for example, I think now there's 5 or 6 gay and lesbian members of Congress or in the Senate, and I don't think that you don't have people that are particularly would be walked down the street and somebody would say, "Oh, that looks like a queer over there," but that doesn't diminish their contribution as gay people to the political process. I mean, I don't know what Republicans feel comfortable with. I mean, there are some gay people who want to be Republicans because why do they want to be Republicans? They probably like money a lot. That's probably why a lot of people want to be Republicans. I mean, I like money, but I don't like it quite to that level.
All right. I want to thank Alan. Thank you all. Next year, the 1980s.